Hello, and we are moving this week.
We're moving and we're grooving.
Gonna keep on moving.
Disco.
Yeah.
It's Disco Wednesday.
It's
You come into my place, I had it popping for you.
It was popping here. There was a lot of
There's a great
movement.
this is a song I'm like addicted to right now. It's a techno song. You know, we both love EDM music.
Oh yeah.
But it's a hard techno song. It's called Freak.
Freak.
That's what it's just great.
Was that the one that was on?
Yeah, and then it has
was
that girl
awesome.
talking, and she's like,
Oh, that was a
you know,
great
you turned
song.
me into this. You made me do this.
That was a great song.
I know, yeah. And then the beat is like the stop.
I'm going
on
a bike ride later. I'm going to listen to that.
You should.
I want to.
Yeah, you're gonna love it.
I want to.
I've been into hard techno here lately. Spotify has a playlist. Spotify's amazing. And this should be on another. How they can. What do they call that when they start aggregating the songs that you like, and then how they're able to pick like these gems of discovery?
You talking about their algorithm?
Yeah, their algorithm's got to be amazing.
Well, it's
better than YouTube.
Remember we talked about all music is its own algorithm?
Yeah.
Right? It has its own structure. So once it realizes the structures you enjoy, it knows exactly what to keep sending up
But
to
it gives you such like new ones where you're just like, I've never heard this before. How have I not heard this?
Oh, it's great. I love discovery is interesting.
Yeah. So here lately, it's just been hard techno beats.
I love it.
Yeah, just 160 beats per minute. Go.
It's fine.
Yeah, that's what we're going to talk about.
We're going to talk about go, right?
Yes.
We're going to talk about in our creational law series again, the law of motion. So would you mind open this up with let's go with the definition we have here, and let's start to break this down.
In the law of motion. I'm trying to prepare myself for my audiobook. When I do my New York Times bestseller.
Oh.
You can write my forward.
I'll write the forward. I will.
Thanks, Alex.
Yeah. I'll also speak the forward too on the audiobook.
Thank you. Yeah. I would love that. I want to have an interactive audiobook where it's each chapter, and then right after the chapter, there's almost like a podcast like this where it's teaching the principles out of that chapter.
Oh, that's very cool.
So you can be a part of that.
I love that.
Yeah. We'll just write the book together.
Okay.
That sounds great.
I
had to put you on. See how I just weaseled you into the spot?
Yeah, now I'm forced into doing something.
We're going to revolutionize the world. This marketing book has to be...
I like it.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Okay, law of motion. Here we go. Motion is upbuilding and preservation.
That's correct.
I love this already. Okay. Wow, that was powerful right there. Both those. Uplifting and preservation. Because you seem like those are the economies, but they're not. I.e., creating and preserving as well as further development right up to a distinct destination, even though that destination is always moving.
The destination's always moving, right? And this is the relativity of our universe. Okay. So let's give a general idea of motion from a macro.
Albert loved relativity.
You bet he did. From a macro view. Okay, we are driving a car on a highway.
Idiots.
Yeah, we are idiots. We're driving a car on a highway, moving in a certain direction or vector. And we're going to drive on this highway, and this highway is going to circle the globe. If we could do that, great. And then we're going to do that on a planet that's spinning. So the Earth is rotating amongst its axis, with its precession, a little bit of wobble. And then that is also moving around the sun. And then the sun itself is also rotating while it's moving closer to the center of our galaxy, this local galaxy in the Milky Way. And then the Milky Way itself, as a universe, is also moving.
Right.
Everything's in constant motion, right? So that's kind of like the macro view here. And if we start to look at the law of motion and how that kind of affects things, I want to use a metaphor here, because it's the upbuilding. Okay, motion always takes you to some sort of end destination, good or bad. But that destination is going to teach you a lesson.
Right.
Okay? Because you've made the choices, cause and effect, causality, interaction, all those things. But there actually has to be something that actually gets it where it needs to go. Okay? Nothing can stay static. So let's consider you are managing a yard, and there's beautiful grass.
Right.
Okay. And now in order for you to manage that grass, you have to fertilize it. There's constant walking over it. Spreading seed, fertilizer, nitrates, and then, spraying the water on it. Okay. And then the wind moves it back and forth, and that's also shifting the dirt, bouncing it out across the land. That's management. That's movement of that area. And you know what the end goal is. It's that perfect lawn.
Right.
Now, if I sit on my porch and just view the lawn and do absolutely nothing with it, well, what's going to happen? It's going to lack water, nutrients. Right. Weeds will start to grow, and they'll start to sap from that certain area because I'm not tending to it. There's a stagnation in the area. And if there's stagnation, I don't have, nice weather coming in, right? I don't have, movement of fluids through the soil to distribute the nutrients properly. If there's a lack of movement there, things start to die. And there's no end goal. There's actually no learning. It's just pure observation to see what's going on. And it's observation without action. Because if I'm not taking an action, like an action of movement, then there's nothing for actually to be learned.
Who's observing the action?
Well, I'm observing the action because I'm the one taking the action. So I can actually observe myself doing it. I can observe it physically, or I can observe through a thought.
Yeah, and we talked about that in the last podcast. I sent you that book the other day, but it doesn't happen until it's observed.
Yeah, that's correct.
The action is created off the observation.
That's precisely correct. And so
that's physics.
So inaction, whatever it might be, right? Just like sitting there and not doing anything will cause things to die. It'll cause a lack of learning. There's no preservation. So it's like when you think of the word preserve, you think people want to think, oh, like I'm gonna hold this.
Right.
I'm just gonna hold it here. I'm not gonna do anything. Hold it. That's preservation. Well, it's not really preservation. Preservation requires movement, change, adaptability, flexibility. It requires caretaking.
Well, I always think of like a baby neglected.
Yeah, or like a baby neglected, right? The baby, it has to be worked. Things have to be worked in order to, the Scottish had a philosophy on being polished like a stone.
Right. And
that requires work. And they said the more you begin to work and round those edges and really bring them up to a nice luster and shine, that's when you became, a quality, decent human being. You've worked off the roughness of who you are through your understanding, through the movement and the labors.
Right.
And so when we look at that law of motion, we can understand that if we look at nature, everything is in constant movement. Your body's in constant movement with its fluids. If your heart, this is obvious, but if the blood stops flowing, what happens?
Yeah, you're toast.
It stagnates and you die, right? If you have a lack of movement and you don't effectively take care of yourself, well, then plaque's going to start to build up within, your arteries, restricting that movement, creating a stagnation, and then death. So without movement, without actually following that natural creational law, you're going to find out that the longevity of yourself, your thoughts, and everything around you will be at a much shorter lifespan. So actually by moving with movement, adopting it into your mentality through that preservation and that uplifting of yourself, the movement of your thoughts, right? Because if I don't think about anything, Jason, if I sit here with a complete lack of thoughts for how to actually evolve myself, then there will be no evolution.
But so when I'm thinking of evolution, and we got into Darwin before, so we won't get into that, but the principle of evolution, and we get into we were going through our notes earlier, but when you look at that probability of surviving based off of outcome that is around you, like we have extinct animals, and then that is motion, that is energy that has completely stopped that, form, and those forms to be able to reproduce are gone forever.
Yeah.
So they've gone extinct.
Yeah. So if they're thinking about like a catalyst from the outside,
right? Because preservation and extinction, that's what I was kind of getting into.
That's correct. And, like I said, it's not about just like sitting in a hole from a defensive position the entire time. You have to move, right? Mm-hmm. So if you shoved yourself into a box, right? If the joints can't move and get fluid, they begin to fail.
But yeah, and so then not to get esoteric, but that is a lot of people are doing that in their lives through fear.
Well, that's not esoteric at all. Fear creates immobility.
Yes.
Fear creates inaction. Fear stops people from thinking certain ways. It stops them from doing a lot of things. And not that the things they were going to do were negative. It was just through a lack of ignorance and understanding.
Right.
That's prevented them from creating emotion within themselves. Not an emotion, but a motion.
Right. No, that makes sense.
Because you have to have emotion of thoughts, feelings, and also the physical aspects of yourself. If you're not moving, right, then you can't create the catalysts that are required to create your own learning, but also things that can benefit your life.
But, because I really like this word preservation, and when I read it, I understood where you're coming from. But I want, because I've talked to you quite a bit, but I want people to understand, because when we look at like preserving something, where we think of locking it in a box, like the Declaration of Independence, you can go see it.
Right.
And they've gone through detail to make sure it's all clean and nothing's going on, and they inspect it every once, and they put white gloves on.
Correct.
And they have the little brushes, and then they're locking it away. Like, let me take all this gold, put it in Fort Knox, and put it and preserve it.
Right.
It's like fear-based scarcity. You know what I mean?
Of course,
but that's not
scarcity.
The preserving that you're talking about.
No, that's really isn't preserving. That's just trying to keep a dead thing alive, right? So that's written on a piece of paper, which is cut from a dead tree. The second the tree's cut, it's already dying.
Right.
So you've ended the preservation, frankly, of that thing's life right there. Now what you're trying to do, it's decaying. You're trying to stagnate the decay.
Yes.
Which is, frankly, the motion of death for things in its natural state.
Right.
Okay, so death has its own motion. Decay has its own motion. So preservation is realizing the motion in both directions, and you can choose to preserve with that motion. And that's the uplifting, right? Don't kill the tree. Don't you put it on a piece of paper like that. Put it on something dynamic, flexible, living. The thing is, we have so many ideas. We're so materially driven that when we think of preservation, it's like, how do we stop something from rusting and falling away from our life?
Right.
Well, the things that really do last, right, are the immemorial things. Those are your thoughts. Those are the feelings.
Right.
And the thoughts and the feelings are the things that actually created the Constitution.
Right.
It wasn't the piece of paper that created itself. No, it was the thoughts and the feelings of the people. It was the uplifting. It was their movement.
That's what lasts the lifetimes.
That's what lasts the lifetime. And those
not the paper.
Those ideologies, those values, those thoughts are the things that are carried forward. The piece of paper doesn't carry anything forward. It's all of us in agreement with the motion of our lives, living these things out.
Yes, that's the motion.
We're the ones that are preserving it through our actions.
Yes, there you go.
The earth preserves itself through its rotation. Without that rotation, we have no weather systems. There's no movement. It builds up plaque in its arteries.
Right.
Okay. Without its tides to flush it and pull it in and out.
Right.
Like if I was going to get into a cold bath and then jump into a hot bath, right? By forcing the blood in and out of my extremities, same sort of function.
Right. Yes.
Okay. That movement is so necessary for that preservation of life.
Yeah. And I think, the two words that you use here when we get into that, and we've talked about preservation, but you said creating and preserving. And I looked at it as like you were talking earlier, almost like have you ever seen those, I forgot what they call them, where like the water goes into the hole and then it goes way, way down. And then all of a sudden it spews big time out.
Geyser?
But they have them like in the, at the sea and stuff like that, and the rocks and stuff, and you can look down and there's a big hole.
I really have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, I forgot the name of them, but they're really cool. They have them on like National Geographic and stuff like that. But and then next thing you know, it'll fill up this big pool of water, and then you look, and now there's like this 100-foot hole. So as the waves are coming in and out, as that tide is pulling this water back and forth,
correct,
it's creating this surge that is continual.
It's continual.
And on the outside, it looks like like we're observing it on the outside and saying, oh, okay, here's a pool of water and it's 20 feet deep. And then 5 minutes later, 30 minutes later, you look down and there's a 100-foot hole. So externally in that moment, we look at it and we're seeing two different diametrically opposed in our limited thought but when we actually look, it's continual and it's needing to do that either way. Because
correct,
we're so outcome driven and we're so right now external looking at it. So whenever I saw what you said here, creating and preserving, that's kind of how I looked at it. It's like sometimes you think like, and when you talk about it, sometimes you think like maybe I'm in preservation mode, when actually you're creating, and vice versa. It's a pump, it's kind of like,
well, of course it is a pump. So it's
like a
something,
heart that's pumping to your circular system.
You're exactly right. So I'm creating something through an action, right? And that action creates a preservation.
Yes.
Oh, I've created it. Now this is here. What do I do with it? Oh, now that it's being preserved, I need to take action upon it again.
Yes.
That goes back to causality, interaction.
They all things.
But that movement is the key part of it, right? So I think I have the philosopher right. Democritus made a comment. He said that no man steps in the same river twice. And back all that time during Greek philosophy, they had a very good understanding of this natural law that the universe was in constant motion. Everything around them was in constant motion. Their thoughts, nature, rivers, sand, beaches, birds, you name it. Even the emotional interaction between people, right? So even though if I'm going to cross a river and step here, the water is always redefining itself. It's always recreating itself to find the most optimal, efficient path. Let's look at water in its motion, right? And Victor Schauberger, German scientist, back in the 40s, he knew this very well through understanding these studies, right? He would watch how water would actually carve itself into the most efficient pattern possible.
Right.
But it was never doing it in the same way. It was always redistributing the bed of sand. It was always doing what was necessary to preserve itself, its flow state,
right,
and always get there in the most, evolved, efficient way possible.
Yeah, and it's the same. You can see that with two people that are extreme martial artists or wrestlers or something. That's what they're doing. They're using everything around them, whether it's leverage. We always think it's brute force, and they'll always tell you it's not.
Yeah.
That's why a 140-pound man can take down a 250-pound man.
Right.
Because he's using his own leverage against them. This motion is, like you said, it becomes fluid, and Bruce Lee talked about that, where you become like water, and then you rush when you need to be. Water can be that little drip, drop, 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 or it could be this huge tidal wave, like we saw, unfortunately, in Indonesia and stuff like that.
That's
the power of water in its motion.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So I just recently picked up rock climbing, and I have destroyed my hands.
Oh wow, yeah.
And the reason I've destroyed them is because I fundamentally lack right now the technical ability to have my motions proper when I'm up on the wall.
Mm.
And so through that, I created injuries for myself. I wasn't preserving myself because I didn't appreciate the motions that are required to take action to do this activity.
Where like a normal guy like myself would think, okay, I'm strong.
It doesn't work like that.
Yeah, it doesn't work that way.
It has nothing to do with that.
Right.
I thought, in the beginning, I got to pull myself up. No, but really, I'm hanging from my skeletal structure, and I'm actually stepping up with my legs. Everyone thinks you're pulling up with your arms, right? But it's the fluidity of those movements that allow me to preserve my body as I'm going through this workout. And so, these are a lot of the physical material things, right? And motion expands into other, aspects of life that we can talk about that are more ethereal, non-material. And one of those is the golden rule.
Right.
So in order for
doing to others, I think doing to
yeah.
Remember, son.
In the pulpit.
Yeah. In the pulpit. I like that.
People, we have to look at this because we're on a sphere, okay, the earth. It's a closed system. So everything we do has to come back to us.
Mm-hmm.
It's a closed system. So what you do does not go away. Whether it happens in, you feel the repercussions 5 minutes from now, days, years, or decades from now, it'll show up. We have to realize this. And so our thoughts, right? So how we begin to consciously think, the treating of these motions, right? Or our interactions with people, our movement of thoughts around them, and even moving our thoughts to bend them to how other people think, right? So if I share an idea with you, right, it creates a motion within yourself, within your consciousness, right? It begins a working. I can't just say things to you and you have inaction.
No, most of the time I say, Alex, that's illegal.
Yeah.
I don't think we should do that.
That's not going to go over well.
No.
We're going to have the feds at the door.
Oh, yeah. Like earlier, he's like, let's put this AC/DC song on the intro of our podcast. Alex, that's illegal.
That's a bad idea. But the thing is, what's happening here is that the thought creates that motion, right? And so if I'm thinking bad thoughts all the time, it's going to create motions within myself that lead me into bad areas. And I won't feel the repercussions now, but I may feel them later, or even how I tend to treat you. If I'm constantly thinking bad thoughts,
or those may be reproductions that are 2 lives from now.
It could be multiple lives.
You may not feel those now.
Yeah. Or maybe I make a choice now. Listen, let's look at this from a societal aspect. If I take this can, right, I don't recycle it, I just chuck it in the ocean.
Right.
It may hang around. I don't know what the decay time is on an aluminum can. And, I may die.
32.7
I may reincarnate 2 lifetimes from now.
Right.
I didn't feel the effects now throwing it in the ocean. But when I show up and I got bad water to drink and we're in a just totally apocalyptic world, I'm just saying from not that a tin can.
No, because if 9 billion people throw their cans in.
That's precisely correct. So if we look at it from a societal standpoint, we don't feel it right now, but we're going to feel it. And we're going to put ourselves in a pinch point. So that the motion.
Collectively.
Right? So the motion of those ideas, the motion of our collective, the movement of who we are as human beings on this closed system is going to come back and affect us.
But the individual movement that you have affects it collectively too.
You bet it does. That's not.
So we don't. That's the thing we don't. That's the thing we don't understand or see. I was listening to a podcast, and the lady had wrote an article on meat. We've talked about this before on Higher Density Living, and she's like, it would be fine if there was 20 people in the world eating a cow every once in a while.
It was not.
But when you look at the population growth, and we look at what's happening in India, South America, China, and then you look at the amount of like fast food restaurants starting to go into China hardcore, and these different areas. Then you look at the amount of cows that are on the earth, and then the amount of pollution, and the amount of feed, the amount of water that they take.
Well, look at
now you have an unsustainable resource, and then now we find out we're consuming more and more of this resource, and on top of it, we have a population explosion. Now what happens?
Right. And
we're in an unsustainable closed loop system.
Yeah, it's unsustainable. It's a spiraling movement going down, right? It's a motion that's going to become difficult to stop because there's momentum, right? So if we look at Newton with his force mass times acceleration, right? So if we're considering the force that a thought or the actions we're taking, all right? If the mass, all the thought behind it, and then us physically doing something with it, okay, is the acceleration.
Right.
This is going to start to slam into stuff, right? It's going to create problems. You might not see it now, but as those numbers grow in magnitude, so does the force on the other side to balance it out. The system has to work in balance.
The system has to work in balance. Right. So let's get into intent and action.
Great.
There's two different things.
Yeah. So intent, right, is the thought. So you have a motion of an intent.
That's energy.
That's energy.
The thought can be as much energy as the action.
No, absolutely. There's to say it isn't would be a false idea because, again, everything has to be in balance, right?
Right.
So the thought with its own energy, there's an intent. So I have an idea that I'm going to mobilize myself to go take some sort of action. Mm-hmm. And the intention is to do something positive or negative, right? So now I have the mobilization within my mind. And then from that, I have to move that mobilization from my consciousness to the motor functions within my body to go take those actions or even verbalize them, to speak them. And so that's when the actual intention becomes the action, right? And there's also a movement between the bridge of both of those things. They can't one thing can't move and the other, becomes stagnant.
That makes sense.
They work hand in hand. They're also in constant movement with one another. And they're always shifting their balance to see which one's going to take, the forefront, but they lead in very logical step, cause and effect, interaction.
But you can see intent always produces action. And if I'm wanting to rob a bank and I plan this out and it takes me 2 years to plan all this out,
right?
And I invest time in the intent, the action will be created.
Well, yeah, that's because you're driving that into the subconscious. So that means everything you do within the movements of your day, you're subconsciously driving yourself towards that malintent, right? To do something that is otherwise of bad intention.
And let's get into subconscious real quick because people don't realize the subconscious, just as your heart is working 24/7.
Yeah, your subconscious works 24/7 in perfect logical order, right? When you sleep, you don't not have a dream. You might wake up and not remember it, but it is also in motion. Mm-hmm. It is constantly creating. It is constantly preserving itself by working. Right? The subconscious has to work so that it can also evolve its own block, right? So if your subconscious is pulling in all this information all day long, it's trying to evolve what it knows and understands from around it. So that is in constant motion. It's constantly working for its upbringing, right? And preservation of itself.
Right.
So this immaterial thing is trying to preserve itself just as much as you and I when we go to the gym or try and do a workout.
But I want people to understand because I've been reading a lot of books like 1930s and stuff like that, and I look at Stalin. Hitler was just a crazy person. Mm-hmm. If we want to say evil, we could say evil. But Stalin, I think, actually believed in socialism and thought that he was in a weird way doing good. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like it seemed like he believed in his principles.
Yeah, you could
that he displayed, and it ended up causing cannibalism and people starving to death, and
right.
We've seen the Gulag, and the list goes on and on about how horrific things were in Russia at that time.
But he diluted his subconscious to a state of belief.
Yes, that's what I was getting into.
So these constant thoughts, right, through intent, without judging the intent, that intent actually materialized itself through immobilized itself. There was a motion to that intent.
But look how large that motion was.
Look at the effect.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. That intent and him sitting there over and over again, or you take Hitler, Mein Kampf, he wrote that when he was young. I think he was in jail, right? When he wrote that?
Yeah. That was after he was a wallpaper hanger.
Yeah. So whenever he's sitting there putting this ideology together, and then the intent gets going, and then he gets teenagers involved, and then they're pushing this, and then, Nazism starts to gain traction in Germany. And then now you see groups of people, and then these propaganda and these speeches going, and then movement. Yeah. And now that movement begins to just multiply.
Correct.
And, 10x. And then now you have a whole country willing to take on the world for this intent. Now we have action. We have World War II.
Yeah, look at a pool table.
Yes.
So if I'm gonna take, I got the cue ball, okay, and I'm gonna hit it with my action, right? I'm gonna hit the cue ball, and it's gonna hit whatever one it is, stripes or solids. It's gonna go from one thing of movement with an actionable trigger to now two bodies in movement.
Mm-hmm.
So movement is always grows upon itself, right? Like a plant in the ground, it doesn't grow up and just, sprout one leaf. Some things may, right? But if we're looking at the general consensus for the law, it's the upward preservation. So it's going to create as much action as possible out of that momentum. So that's why the fruiting bodies on all those plants, like mushrooms, have millions of spores.
Yes.
Right. They are in constant movement, and those spores have to move to where they need to go. Just like, the oceans, the ebb and the flow.
Yeah. It uses the wind, and it's using other, like those little sucker fish that are on the sharks,
right?
Just hanging out.
That's what. And
there's a reason they clean the sharks, So that's why
this is a good point.
Right.
Let's talk about that shark for a second. That shark has to constantly be swimming.
Yes, or it dies,
all the time. Yeah. Without movement, it cannot find food.
Right.
Okay. It will not move to the warmer
waters. I think
waters.
if they stop moving, they die.
I don't know, but I'm not sure about sharks. I know they have a thing called the ampullae of Lorenzi, which it picks up
oh my God,
electrical frequencies in the water to see if something's in the struggle, but it can't find those frequencies unless it moves.
So every time I'm swimming, it knows.
Yeah, it would know because you're just in constant panic. Yeah.
Chopping at the water.
But the gills, right? So, we need to constantly intake air into our body. There's a constant movement that's happening with our lungs. That's the preservation of self in our system. That's what alkalizes our blood, is that breathing. And so what we want to do is we want to focus on how movement can be applied to everyday life for us. Not just a movement of me going outside and walking. That's one aspect of it. But really is understanding the movement as a creational law and how it applies to everything else that's going on and how it multiplies within itself, right? And that you can use movement to your advantage for a mobilization of yourself, your preservation, and your thoughts. So I want to take, one example of that. We did an episode on dreaming.
Yes.
Okay. So for me to mobilize or create motion within my dreams, to have them go beyond the subconscious, something that I could learn from in my daily waking life, I wanted to record them. I wanted to write them down, because if I could catalog it, then I could constantly think upon it. And that constant thinking is a motion of my consciousness. And doing that allowed me to learn and uplift myself, preserve those thoughts and the ideas that my subconscious were trying to teach me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
So for a practical purpose, that was something that I did, that I like to use as an example. And I think it's a really good example that people should try. But in terms of that motion, that's something, I needed to look at, because if 55% of my life is moving one way and the other 45% my eyes are closed, I should pay attention to that.
Yes.
There's movement there.
Yes.
There's emotion that's felt there that can't be ignored. Right. And so everything, and that drove me to take action into that area. So again, I have movement into the immaterial and the material at the same time. They find balance, but they also interact with one another and they begin to magnify.
Yeah. And I think, whether you're involved in a startup company or whether you're mid-level management, whatever it may be. And I don't remember who said the quote, but they said, it would be better to do a wrong action than to do no action at all.
Because if you do no action at all, there's no learning.
Right.
So by doing a wrong action, hopefully you can integrate the learning from that wrong action and then not make that same mistake again. But if you never do anything, then you'll never know what is right or wrong. So there has to be movement in your life. You can't be, as a human being, you can't be afraid to take action. You can't be afraid to make choices. You can't be afraid to question things within yourself. Question those thoughts. Why am I having those feelings? Why am I thinking this way?
Well, I always think of like my dad's side is from Georgia. And when you go down to Georgia, you see these like little ponds, and they would have like really stagnant, and you'd smell, and it would stink, and there'd be a layer, and then eventually, if it stayed stagnant, didn't have an underwater spring or something to feed it, all the oxygen would go out, and it would kill the fish, and then now you would just have this. It would just eventually turn into this big green slimy
putrefaction.
Putrefaction. Yeah, and so whenever I look at me having to make a decision and then I see fear there, I always picture my fear being like that stagnant pond.
Right.
And so how do I get something movement, that flowing? Where do I get that bringing oxygen to this?
I like that.
You see what I'm saying? To bring it alive, because I know that if I don't make a decision in this, it may karma, golden rule, Newton's third law, we have the notes on that, but I know that it is affecting a domino into so many other parts of my life and other people's parts of my life.
By not taking action.
Yes, by not taking action. So like you said, if I take a wrong action, let's say it hurts someone. Well, then now I get to learn from it. 2, I get to practice humility and forgiveness.
Yes.
And then from there, I'm a wiser, more, if you want to say, I'm like, I can look at that next, because I've gained self-awareness. I can look at that next decision and say, okay, Jason, you remember when you did this and you were being an idiot?
Right.
Well, this is not what we're going to do in this situation. We're still going to take action. We're going to think about it maybe for just a little bit, and then we will move in the direction that we have learned from and go to. You see, I don't know if that makes sense.
That's precisely correct. You then afford yourself that movement.
Yes.
The movement of thought, and also oxygenating that stagnant pond, that swamp. Right?
But people, I think there's so many people, like with everything going on now in the elections and all that, there's just so many people hiding in their homes being stagnant, when we know, doctors over and over again are saying, eat healthy, get vitamin D, go out in the sun, go for walks. But instead you spend 6, 8, 9 months stuck in a stagnant home. You're not exercising, you're not working out. You just have CNN or Fox News on all the time.
Right.
Those thoughts create those actions. Next thing you know, someone's blowing their brains out, or, in extreme levels or whatever. Or you having, depression, or
like widespread depression. It's rampant right now.
Yeah, it is. How can
the quality of life is not as good as it should be, considering we have all these resources?
Well, I would think that depression, that's something I've battled with for my whole life. So I would think depression for me is when I don't have a clear vision and I am being stagnant.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, cause when I get depressed, I think it's just me feeling like, okay, I don't really have a purpose right now, or I'm not focused on my purpose.
Sure.
So I'll just eat this nasty ice cream and lay here and watch 20 episodes of Game of Thrones. You know what I mean?
Then it's a stagnation of mind, right?
Yeah.
Because you're not creating a catalyst within yourself to afford yourself a movement to change those thoughts. So if this depression in yourself, or if anyone's a listener, is like a big heavy boulder.
If anyone's a listener, bro, we have lots of listeners.
No, I know. No, I'm saying,
that one lady.
Yeah. My point is that the boulder does not move unless there's force applied to it.
Yes.
That's as simple as it is. So if there's something that is holding you back in life, you need to face it without fear and take motion to actually evolve.
The only thing we fear is fear itself.
Fear itself.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
That's from
Churchill.
your neck of the woods. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that, if we're looking at those aspects, you need to challenge the thoughts within yourself. Look up at the sky and realize that the sky is in constant motion, but it's been there for a very, very long time.
Yes.
Billions and billions and billions of years. And understand that through its movement, it's preserved itself. So you should take credence in what you're looking at and be like, I need to continue to move and take action within myself so I can continue to preserve and, live and last as long as possible.
Yeah, because if you're just sitting at home eating and you have a dog that's just sitting there eating, when you and the dog could go outside and go for a walk,
yes,
and get healthy fresh air, you're preserving yourself.
Of course,
like you said with the sky. I want to get into the Sanskrit definition of karma.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's one word. It's real funny.
Yeah.
It means action.
That's all it means.
But that's so liberating.
Yeah.
It's okay. I need to take action.
You have to do something.
But how do you get to the point of where you take responsibility? Because once you, and we talked about this with cause and effect, but once you take 100% responsibility, then it seems like action follows.
Well, it has to follow, because taking responsibility is the very first step of action.
Yes.
And then with responsibility, you also find forgiveness. And that's the equalization of thoughts.
So like, let's see this song. Let's say you're on your bike ride today, and then you're pedaling, you're kind of getting a little tired, and then you play the freak song, and then it's like doom, it's like really good. Isn't it weird how like a song or a movie? I watched Last Dance with Michael Jordan,
right?
And like I can't go to sleep. I just watched this. Why did I watch this right before I was going to bed? Because now I want to do shit, and I'm like pumped. Or you're like getting tired, then all of a sudden you hear the song, you're like, I can pedal. Fuck yeah.
You're proving the point right here.
Yeah.
It wasn't.
How did I create that energy?
It wasn't the movie. It was your thought.
Yes.
It was the action of the thought that created that energy within yourself. It was always there.
Yes.
But you're sapping your own energy through your lack of motion within your own thoughts.
So we create our own energy?
Of course you create your own
panels?
energy. Yeah. You're your own resonating little core, right?
So when we don't have energy, then that means that we're not resonating with these laws and with creation.
Right. You're sapping yourself from all this beautiful energy that is around you all the time, even the energy of your thoughts.
Yeah, I'd put some Bible stuff in here. I know you love the Bible.
No, go ahead.
I mean, you've been reading a book on the Bible and stuff like that. But I wanted to, because they call it, in the Bible, they call it, there's a war between the flesh and the spirit. Like you have heaven and hell and all these things, So that they say the flesh is like, when you're giving into sin, like sin would be like a word for like selfishness or
material desires,
doing bad things or whatever. But when I really began to study the Bible now and I look at sin, it's anything, because basically they say anything that's going against God. So I replaced that and I put this: anything that goes against the laws of creation,
sure,
would be, let's say, sin.
Yeah. And
so now the spirit side of things is when you align with God. That's external. I'm not talking external, because I know in us is everything, but
correct.
The flesh is us looking on the here and now, and not believing in anything but what is happening now, and like we're just these little biological blobs. Where the spirit is looking and saying, "There's this greater force.
There's more
that I have, and then how can I let that flow, and how can I tap into it?" Like a metaphor would be prayer. Like, talking to a higher power, so these are all symbolic. I think the Bible, a lot of that is metaphorical and symbolic to like a lot of these scriptures, to sit there and tell us and say, hey, the reason there's so much inaction in your life, the reason that you're poor, busted, and disgusted, if you want.
That's an interesting line. Poor, busted, and disgusted.
It's an old line from a long time ago, but whenever it's because you're looking at who you are and what you view, the thoughts of you viewing what you are, instead of actually understanding the truth that lies within you eternally.
I love that.
You know what I mean?
It's almost like having a poverty of mind leads to a poverty in the physical.
Oh, yes. That's true. But it's all thought.
It's all thought. It has to start with thought. The body does not just, will itself to go do things. The thoughts create that action. Subconsciously, your heart continues to pump, right? There's all these other things that the subconscious is doing, but the thinking part that actually creates mobilization through your own free will.
Right.
That's on you. Yeah,
I was talking to a Muay Thai welterweight professional fighter on my other podcast, and I wanted to really get into, because he's in Thailand, and he goes back and forth all the time and all that. Because Muay Thai is like the thing. Little kids are doing it there in Thailand. It's
kicking
awesome.
Banana trees.
Yeah, and all kinds of stuff. And so he told me something that was. He goes, Muay Thai has taught me to learn to live in my mind. And he goes, everything, because he's suicidal and all that, but he goes, everything that I got to work out twice a day. I have to go to the gym twice a day. I have to run twice a day. They have a really strict schedule. And they get to you. And then, and this is funny, in our American culture, we're looking at it and say, well, you should only go to the gym 3 times. You need rest and you need all this stuff, which rest is important. But they pushed him beyond the envelope, and his body began to adapt and grow and react to where he could do 2 sessions of Muay Thai fighting plus a morning run and an evening run, which in his mind, he never thought that was even capable.
No, that's, you know, that's
like you're doing climbing right now. When you watch that Free Solo or whatever, you know, that movie with the guy that
Alex Honnold.
Yeah, that El Capitan, and he climbed it, you know, with no ropes or anything. And when you watch that movie over and over again, even though he's fearless, but it was still this whole process of him working it through his mind.
Well, he did.
And then the action happened.
Well, remember he sat down with a pen and paper, stared at the mountain, and he thought his entire route out. Every handhold, everything.
But he was
the action happened here first. It was the willingness to go and actually do that.
But I think a lot of people don't realize the action that he did was give up a home, give up everything, live in a van. I mean, sometimes the external things around us are what are holding us back.
Those are the things creating the stagnation. Maybe it is the walls of the swamp, right?
Yes.
Maybe those are holding us back. Maybe we need to break the dam down
within
ourselves or even around us. You know, maybe it's the motion of choices that we take, you know, going into work. Remember like going through the motions?
Yeah, and it reminds me like with Reagan and stuff in the 80s when you see that wall come down, you know, and then that division between East and West.
Take down that wall, Mr. Gorbachev.
Yeah, but you saw how East Germany and West Germany, and then the interaction between them, and then it was literally a graffiti concrete wall.
I know.
And then when it was removed, it's inanimate object. It's fucking concrete.
But dude,
but did you see what happened to those people when they were pulling each other through?
I know.
And dancing and smoking cigarettes and drinking and having, and now we're brothers.
Yeah.
You know, we're best of friends now.
It was all the motion of the mind. It was the stagnation of thought.
For years and years and years.
By fear. Fear prevented the thinking. It prevented the action from actually occurring.
And so what energy did that inanimate wall, that piece of shit, I mean, it pisses me off because when I see that, it's so powerful and moving that a stupid concrete wall caused so much division.
Yeah. It was a physical representation of division.
And now we're allowing these doctors that are propaganda, news medias, and I can't wear a mask, or I'm liberal if I wear a mask, or I'm conservative if I don't wear a mask.
It's
and fuck masks.
It's those ideas of separation every time.
Every time. And that creates this, like we have now in our political system, this nasty, dirty, green, stagnated, disgusting pond.
Psychological dis-ease of all of us.
And then we have these leaders that are like, come swim in this pond with me.
No.
It's toxic. It's ugly. It's nasty. We don't want you to breathe. We don't want you to know who you are as an individual.
Yeah.
We collectively want you to be in the swamp so that we can barely keep you alive.
Look at a swimming pool, right? If there's not, it might look good for one day, but say someone turns off the pump.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. It looked good
circulation
2-3 days, right? But then when the motion stops, then you start to see the stagnation. Maybe they got the pump going a little bit. They get you juiced up, amped up to go swimming. And then you're like, wow, wait a minute. This water's getting thick. What is this? What is this slime that's like getting on me? What is this algae that's growing, right? This
and it's so quick
algae.
too.
Yeah. And it's quick to change. Because, you know, the water, like everything else, it needs movement, right?
But why don't people...
It's a false movement.
It is a false movement.
Right? It's a false movement because the basis of the will, the movement of the will through the subconscious was already with a malintent. It lacked the effective force through Newton's equation, right? To actually go where it needs to go. It's just like a fake facade of its power. It's not truly there. And once you're swimming in, you're like, this is actually terrible. When you should have looked to something else, you should have swam in the ocean. It might have more, it has a hell of a lot more strength to it. It's always aerating itself.
Right.
There might be a little bit more chaos to it, but if you can learn to move with the waves, you can find your safety.
Yes.
If you can learn to swim in a riptide when it pulls you out, you can learn to preserve yourself in your life.
Which, that's a great metaphor, riptide, because we're looking and we're saying, I see the shore, I need to swim directly this way.
No.
But so sometimes the things that you see in your life that you think are so ultra clear really aren't the path that these laws have you on.
No, maybe sometimes the motions take you on a roundabout process, but it is in motion, right? If we're in a spinning spiral galaxy, right?
Yeah.
Why is it to say that it's not going in a beeline right to the center?
No.
You know? No, it has to spin and go through its revolutions.
I think and I want you to talk about this because I think with us here, especially in the United States and in lots of parts of the world, we're just always so focused on comfort.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the stagnation that I don't want to be comfortable. I want to push my body constantly. I want to push my mind. I want to be in uncomfortable, fearful positions so that I can learn. I'll give you a prime example. Yesterday, I'm at the park here, right?
Okay.
I'm running with my headphones on. Next thing I hear, right behind me. I'm like, what the? It startles you.
Yeah.
And I look, and there's like a meth user dude or whatever, and he's like at the trash can rattling things. So instantly, my mind goes, prepare yourself, Jason. This dude may come after you. He's going to attack you. He's going to do whatever. He's got a trash can lid. He's looking directly at you. He's got his shirt off.
Yeah, who knows?
He's just crazy. You don't know.
Who knows what's going to happen?
Who knows what's going to happen?
Yeah.
And in that moment right there, I had a choice to make. Now, I can look at this person in fear and hate that I'm in that situation.
Or
I can look at this person as being a human being.
Right.
And understand that my energy has to display. So I instantly looked at him. I looked in his eyes and I looked at him and I recognized in my mind, I recognize him as a human being that has a problem.
Yeah.
Whether it's substance abuse or whatever, but it doesn't matter. He's a human being.
You're forgiving him for his lack of
Yes.
knowing.
Even if he'd come after me, of course I'm going to have to defend myself.
Yeah.
And it was a weird situation because I had my headphones on and it scared the shit out of me,
I believe it.
But I think in those moments when we get into that, and we're looking for comfort constantly, because comfort would say, I don't like being in this situation. Let me call the cops. Let me get this guy out of here. Let's dispose of him.
Yeah, no, I get
it. And
Stalin
was socialism. That's what socialism is.
Right.
So let's dispose of these lesser than, or Hitler. Let's dispose of these people that are lesser than off of this eugenics with the crane size. And, they were saying African Americans and Jews were, in evolution and all that. They just morphed this idea. So the next thing you know, we're putting millions of people into gas chambers. But that's what's happening right now with this toxic, stagnation that is just pumped to us through social media and pumped to us.
What is it?
All this data this fucked up data that we're receiving, and it's all for a seek of comfort based out of fear.
That's what it is.
And
they don't want you to have action.
But living a life of action.
Yeah.
And living this law is going to revolutionize the world.
Yeah, and listen, remember
it creates freedom.
We gave a metaphor of one person has an effect on the total population. Might not see it now, but if everybody's creating that motion all at once, that's a total different uplifting and preservation.
Yeah, look at Martin Luther King Jr. Look what he decided to do.
Look how many people marched on Washington.
We had 300 years of slavery.
But think about how many people marched on Washington, D.C.
Yes.
That's a physical representation of the motion itself. But look at the energy that comes with
it.
And then the thoughts that were behind it.
Yes.
That's when things become impactful.
And then you have people that are sitting there and start questioning.
Yeah.
And I love questioning.
Yeah.
I love when we have, Carol Drucker wrote that book, A Growth Mindset or a Fixed Mindset, that's a psychological book. And when you have this growth mindset and you tap into creation, and you begin to understand the power that is at your fingertips, it's like you're Merlin. Or
people want to see like lightning coming out, but really it's your thoughts are the true magic.
Yes.
That's the glory of
magic.
everything. That is the creational energy within yourself.
Because that thoughts that you're thinking resonates subconsciously, is working 24/7.
All the time.
Now, all of a sudden, you're putting out this energy. I don't know, by me being nice to that guy that scared the shit out of me, and I was, my Marine side is like, well, let's kick this guy's ass. Instead, I'm going to show love. I don't know what that's going to happen. I don't know how that resonates. Maybe the next situation I have, I'm prepared now because I displayed that.
Well, but the thing is, you weren't in a state of comfort. So you learned, right?
Yes.
So you know what the problem is with retirement, and this is what's so bad about retirement, okay, is that you get your lazy boy sofa,
right?
You drink, you eat, you are reliant upon a system to give you a paycheck,
yes,
which forces you not to work or learn anymore. It just says, no, you're fine, just continue what you're doing.
Well, you're done.
And then it's a stagnation of that work. You drop off quicker. Why do people's health problems become so terrible during retirement? It's stagnation of life.
Yes.
It's stagnation of learning. It's stagnation of work.
Yes.
Okay. And if there's not constant movement of work, life, and learning, there's no preservation. There's no upbringing. There's no pursuit of your own evolution. You've cut life short.
I love that. I'm reading a book on bees now, and then this retired CEO, he took up beekeeping.
Yeah.
And then he began to learn this whole process of how bees, and I don't want to get into that. And he wrote a book called The Wisdom of Bees, but that was something that he learned. He's like, there's a point in time where I had to go out there and I watched these because, like a hive creates, like if you could measure energy in an organization, they've done this, and then the amount of efficiency, because a worker bee only lasts 6 weeks, but the amount of efficiency and what they produce and how efficient they are, there's nothing in the world that's that efficient.
Yeah.
When you get that many, if you got that many groups of people together, had them do all these jobs together to the best of their ability, they're working to the best. Bees are working to the best of their ability and being ultra efficient in a community that has one purpose and one goal.
They understand oneness.
And they understand oneness.
They understand the preservation of life.
Yes.
They're not only preserving themselves, but they pollinate our flowers.
Yes.
They preserve our system too. It's not just about them. Just because they're working in one for their species.
Yes.
It's not just a distinct, isolated system. That system affects everything else.
Because they say you take bees away, the whole world goes extinct.
Well, yeah, the world will start to die until something else takes its spot.
Right.
And that could be quite some time.
Yes.
Who knows when another thing will step in and then be able to procreate at a rate where it can then start to pollinate again.
Oh, I love that. So I want to kind of move into a little bit of science and religion with this, because we talked about karma and we talked about, I'm going to grab my notes here.
Yeah. We talked about Newton's force, mass times acceleration. We talked about the golden rule.
And Buddhism says this: treat not others in ways that you yourself would find hurtful. So when you look at a Buddhist, in Buddhism, they don't harm animals. Which is a great tenet. And then Christianity says it this way: everything do to others as you would have them do to you. This is the golden rule. For this is the law and the prophets.
Right.
Confucianism says one word which sums up the basis of all good conduct: loving kindness. Do not do to others what you do not want done to yourself. Hinduism, this is the sum of duty: do not unto others what you would not have them do unto you. Islam, not one of you truly believes until you wish for others what you wish for yourself. Judaism, here we go. What is hateful to you, do not do to your neighbor. This is the entire law. All the rest is commentary. Go and learn it. I love that. Native America, a Pima proverb: do not wrong or hate your neighbor, for it is not he who you wrong, but yourself. That's so freaking good.
But what they understand is this boomerang concept, this movement of thought and action. They understand that what they're throwing out, they're also going to receive it back, and it may come back with much, much more energy than they originally sent it out with.
But we always think negative when we throw the boomerang.
No,
but
why don't I throw a positive boomerang out?
And then what could come back?
Yeah, you can get massive amounts of positive gain back, right? But here's an interesting idea that needs to be thought of, right? So if everything is in a state of equilibrium all the time, if I throw out so much good, I'm going to receive a lot of catalysts in my life that challenge those thoughts, those very good thoughts.
Ooh, let's get into this, the challenge.
So when the motion comes back, okay, when I threw out the good and I get a heavy amount of negative coming back and you're like, why is this happening? I'm trying to be a good person, is because it's solidifying within yourself. And it's asking, can you integrate the learning from something at an even higher negative frequency than what you were currently dealing with that actually led to those good thoughts?
It's wanting you to level up.
It's always, a game, every time you send the motion out, it comes back to help you level up.
It's like, okay, you defeated that monster level 1. Yeah. Well, let's try this monster in level 2.
That's what it does. And that's the boomerang effect, right? That's the motion of our thoughts. That's the motion of our actions. That's the motion of our will.
Our karmic consequences.
Okay. That's an actionable consequence, right? If we're doing the definition of what you said karmic was in Sanskrit.
Yeah. And then, I was reading this one writer and he said this: although we may never feel the results of our actions in this temporal world, those karmic consequences have more significance when seen in the light of our spiritual journey beyond this earthly life.
Well, yeah, and this is what we're saying.
Because I want to get spiritual.
Yeah, so like the can, right? If I make a bad spiritual choice, I chuck a bad spiritual idea in the spiritual ocean, well, I'm going to have to learn it sometime.
Right.
It's not going anywhere. Everything is recorded. All those energies have to stay somewhere. The universe is also a closed system. Just like our Earth is, right? So if I'm sending those energies out, okay, the thermodynamics second law, preservation of energy, right? It's got to show up sometime. So if I don't want to go through the spiritual learning now, I'm going to have to do it later.
Right.
If I continue to ignore it now, if I take a spiritual stagnation of my life and I think I'm achieving with the material, I'm going to realize the next time I come around, or 10 or 20 or 1,000 times I live a life, it's going to be that much harder. And
I think this is where this misteaching of the law of attraction comes into place. When we look at McDonald's and the law of attraction, like, I put out all this good and in 36 seconds, I didn't get, my milkshake or my cheeseburger or whatever. Because everybody goes into this law of attraction.
But they don't appreciate the motions. The earth does not just jack up its speed and spinning and we start like whipping around or our gravity increases, right? The universe does not start spinning at like some massively accelerated rate. There's a stability to the movement. The movement is dependent on the force we initially put on it. So if you're thinking about, the idea of attraction, right? Well, it depends on the actual prolonged force on that object or thought. That's what gives it its acceleration over time on whatever vector or direction you're choosing.
Yeah, and I think the responsibility of each of us whenever we look at the mission, if you want to say that, of what we're put on this earth to do, is a direct result of that. So in this life, maybe you have a big vision and a big goal to accomplish.
Right.
There's going to be that equal amount of force that's coming back at you.
Okay.
It's going to be heavy.
Do you know how many naysayers there were with Turtle?
No, I could imagine.
Tons.
Yeah.
Bad idea. It's going to fail. It'll never work. People will never do that. They'll never sell their own data. Armchair quarterbacks, negative, 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 negative. All day long for years. And then guess what? Through the perseverance, the constant pressure,
right,
preservation and uplifting of myself and my thoughts
and your energy.
And motions, right? Constantly pushing that ball down the road made that thing become a positive reality.
Okay, I want to get into that because I think this is going to help a lot of people right now. So those even the little tiny steps that you had to do that over time with compound interest led to something big.
Yeah.
But even though just trying not to get depressed for the day and trying to keep your mindset, and that may be all you did for that day, but that was huge.
Yeah.
Because we can't look at it and say, we're always trying to rate energy. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like the energy, our whole society is based off of this, especially here in the United States. We have this, it's great. We have this entrepreneurial spirit and all that, but we're always rating things.
Yeah.
1 to 10, I did this, or 1 to 10, I put this much energy or exertion. I have it on my Whoop. It asks me, how much did you exert in this exercise? How much did you really exert?
At a restaurant, 10 out of 10.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So we're sitting there and we get discouraged when we're trying to persevere, like with Tardo. I think it's a perfect example, but you don't know if you could go back or somebody could show you, like the universe could say, this little thing that you did right here was the trajectory to change everything.
Well, listen, that's a function of cause and effect and interaction, right? But those things needed motion. And it was those small motions I did every single day.
Yes.
That led to the greatest motion over time. Okay.
I love that.
It allowed me to travel the longest distance. Small steps every day accumulated over many years to a great distance traveled.
So you've been stuck in your apartment for 8 months. You've gained 40 pounds, walking down a stairs.
Yeah.
And then going back up for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And maybe that's all you can do right now.
Sure.
But your body's amazing. It will adapt. Next thing you're doing 7 minutes, then 10 minutes.
Precisely.
Then 20 minutes. And the next thing you know, I've seen people, David Goggins, that Navy SEAL guy.
Yeah,
that's just
taped up his legs to do that crazy run.
The 200 miles. And he said, and I love this, he said, when you get to 100 miles and you're done, absolutely done. And you've worked all these inner demons in your head and they're just fucking with you.
Yeah.
And then they say 100-mile mark and you're like, I have 100 more miles to go.
Yeah.
So I have a choice right now to quit or all mental. It's all thoughts. That's what he's saying. It's the physical body could do the 200 miles. I mean, unless he breaks a leg or something like that. But he's like, then all of a sudden these inner demons, this thought process coming in. Then he said, there was something that I had to do. And he said, I had to begin to love the suffering.
Yeah.
And Buddhism talks about this too.
He integrated the learning. And it was a physical and mental suffering. He's saying, how do I neutralize and equalize these thoughts to turn them into something positive that gives me the energy to continue that last 100 miles?
So all those negative people, those naysayers.
Yeah.
How did you take that negative energy that was there?
Well, I had
and then how did you?
So it is never not a jarring thing.
Right.
Okay. It is never not upsetting to hear someone naysay against something you've put so much time and effort into.
Right.
Okay.
It's your baby. Yeah.
It does strike you at the core.
Yes.
No matter how much you want to act like you have every wall and shield up, it always sucks. Okay. But it's important to hear what someone else has to say through the perspective. Even though they might be negative, what I can do is I listened to every single negative thing they said, and I thought, how can I retune the message, retune the system, the idea, so that it can't be negated? How is it that I eradicate the fear and the doubt? How do I take the learning of their negativity and turn it into something positive?
Because that negative truth that they're saying may actually be a flaw in your system that you need to work on.
Yes, and it doesn't mean that it's going to fail, and they'll just be like, oh, it's just outright going to fail, right? No, these are interesting points where you can actually take that and take great steps of learning. And the more you hear it, every time someone says something like that to you, the more you can refine your approach, the more you can refine your practices.
Why when people are in the swamp? Because I want to get this. Why when people are in the swamp and they try to pull others back into the swamp when they try to get out? Because there's some people like that. They're like, I like this. I'm going to create energy. And then the people that they've surrounded themselves with.
Well, the thing about like jealousy, dude.
Yeah.
Like social jealousy. Imagine someone in your friends, they start to do really well and you've been struggling. And they only work 5 hours a day, but you're working 15 hours a day for the man.
Right.
But their life's taken off. How are you going to feel inside?
Yeah.
You're going to want to pull them back into the swamp.
Yes.
Right? That's just going to be that.
But why does it make us feel better when we can have other people live in our misery?
Because we think that, we can share the pain with others. That's what it is. We think we can offload pain onto others. But really, the pain is only inundated on yourself. It's self-created.
Right.
You can't share it with someone. No one else can take your pain. It's
your
pain. You created it. But we just have this weird idea that we can pass it off and pull people down with us. And watching them feel lesser than us, feel hurt or whatever it is, you can feel that sense of supremacy again. Right?
Yeah, I have on my, and I know we're at an hour mark, but I have on my phone, and I have it up there too, and I really like this. It sounds negative, but it's motivated me these past few months. It's nobody cares, work harder. So, it's like, and the nobody cares part is like, I think I'm so elevated. And I feel like I'm such a person and so selfish and my ego I want other people to notice me for me to get self-worth. I need people to care externally for me to get validation to do what I need to do.
Right.
But if I look at it and say, nobody cares, work harder, it is my responsibility. I know my balance. I know when I need to go for a run, when I need to work more, when I'm not giving in like I should. I know all of these things, and it is not based on someone else. And that's why I think out of more than anything, this podcast, what you just said was so perfect. It is my pain to bear.
Yeah.
It is not for me, but that's what we do when we get together. When people get together, they want to share each other's pain, and then they want somebody to sympathize with them.
Dude, there's motion.
There's relationships are based off that way.
There's motion and there's motion.
Yes.
Everything is motion.
Yes.
Even that feeling part, that pain, there's motion to that. Figure out how to control that motion.
Right.
Figure out how to work with that motion, those waves that ebb and flow within yourself.
I love that.
Nobody needs to care. You just need to care about yourself. And in doing so, you can help care for others.
Yes, because if I'm sitting with my friend and I'm telling them all the bad about me and they're telling all the bad about them, we're just throwing out this negative energy and we're sitting there and then we're like, so great to be able to talk with you. Had such a good time.
So
thank you for sharing.
Unload. Yeah.
Unload. Yeah.
Well, what was learned there? Nothing, that you're both fucking miserable. It's not where it's like, this is a tough part of the day, but this is actually what I learned about myself.
Yes.
And then the other person can learn from your experience. They're not going to learn from the pain you've internally caused in yourself. They're dealing with their own shit.
Yes.
You don't need to offload it.
That's what I've learned. That's why nobody cares.
The conversation is no longer wise.
No. Oh, yes. And if I sit there and I said, how can I show love to this person while they're sharing this with me?
Sure.
How can I show love? And then I began to share things that, in humility, share things that may have happened to me and then how I've overcame them and things that I'm working on in my life.
Right.
And here's my action steps and here's what I'm doing. And then they receive that however they receive it.
Listen.
Now we're having an amazing conversation that is going to help, not hurt.
Yes. And that is the beautiful part of motion. In between thoughts, motion of emotions, motions of this universe, and the motions of this podcast.
It's like the motion of the ocean.
The motion of the ocean.
Pauly Shore.
And listen, with that, I want to leave it to everyone. Understand that the law of motion is a function of our life, just like the law of interaction, the law of causality, oneness, many other things. And it's not to say that it's greater than any other thing, but it is of equal weight and value.
Yes.
So again, take these little nuggets and then run with the motions of your life to figure out what's the best path for you and take those small steps. Listen to the motions of the naysayers, but step by step, you're going to find out that you are thousands of miles away from where you originally were.
I love that. Wasn't there a New Kids on the Block song? Step by step. Oh, girl. Do you want to be my...
And close it out. Thanks, everybody.